Good day everyone. Today I am discussing the chapters 15, which is the colonial regimes in Southeast Asia. So, while Japan was extending its power to Taiwan, Korea, and Manchuria and beginning to put pressure on itself, the Europeans and Americans continued to develop their interests across the Southeast Asia. So now we will come to the British in Burma and Malaya. So early British interest in Southeast Asia and their expulsion by Dutch in the 17th century was incidental to their concern in India and their efforts to break into the China market. They established what soon to become their major Southeast Asian trade base at Singapore in 1819. They had taken over Malacca from the Dutch in 1795, symbolizing the new shift power as the Dutch captured of Malacca from Portuguese had done in 1641. But its harbor was small and it no longer controlled trade through the Straits. From the start, Singapore, with its large and excellent island-shielded harbor commanding the southern entrance to the Straits, was a commercial center for all Southeast Asia and just for Malaya, which remained largely undeveloped economically and tinily populated until the end of the 19th century. So Burma was next door to India, and under the rule of antiquated monarchy that was never endless expanding westward. A brief war from 1824 to 1826 gave the East India Company special rights in the important coastal province of Burma and checked Burmese expansion. A treaty in 1826 ceded Arakan, Assam, and Tenasserim on eastern borders of India to the British, gave the indemnity, and accepted a British resident at the capital at Ava, who shifted to Mandalay when the capital was moved there shortly thereafter. Another war at British initiative in 1852 to 1853 was followed by the commercial treaties in 1861 and 1867, which include the British right to run steamers on the Irrawaddy. The new king Mindon Min, in general good ruler but tempted like the contemporary kings of Siam to try to play the British off against the French, signed a commercial treaty with the French in 1873. Burma was administered as province of British India with basically the same policies and result until it was finally made a separate colony in 1937. Burma and Malaya saw rapid commercialization after 1880 under the British rule. Railways were built and steam navigation was developed. So, the Irrawaddy Delta in Lower Burma, including much newly cultivated land, became a great exporter of rice, leading the world and yielding 75% of Burma's export. Upper Burma produced timber, especially teak, and the Central Valley yielded oil from new wells drilled by the British. All these were exported from the port of Rangon, which became a small-scale version of Calcutta and served as the colonial capital. Rich deposits of tin were found in Malaya, a metal great demand in industrializing West, and towards the end of the century, Malaya also became the world's major producer of plantation of rubber. The colonial government, especially in Malaya, where the local had almost become a minority in their own country, tried to protect their cultures and rights and rule as much as possible through native sultans, but both countries were economically transformed under colonialism. For the most of the 19th century, Malaya was divided into the British-owned trade settlements Penang, Malacca, and Singapore, founded in 1819, leaving the rest of Malaya in the hands of several local sultans, some with British residents. But in 1895, they formed what they called the Federated Malay States, incorporating the most important and sultanates, mainly those on the tin and rubber producing West Coast under the British control. By the early 90s, rubber production in Indonesia was second only to Malaya. Oil was also found and exploited. The discovery of more oil as well as thin and prime land for rubber and tobacco prompted the Dutch in increase their control, first of Sumatra and then of the other island of Borneo Celebes, the Moluccas, Bali, and the hundred of smaller islands in archipelago of south of the Philippines. Tin and oil joined rubber as major exports and new railways and ports were built to expedite trade. The northern coast Borneo was divided between the British colonial administration and nominally independent sultanates run as private preserves by British entrepreneurs, the Brooke family. The next is French and Dutch colonialism. Largely eliminated from India by the end of 18th century, the French sought their own colonial sphere in Asia and used persecution of French Catholic missionaries in Vietnam as pretext of conquering Vietnam's southern province in 1862, including the port of Saigon. Later, they annexed Cambodia and Laos, and after defeating Chinese forces sent to protect the tributary state, took over northern Vietnam in 1885. Southern Vietnam also became a major exporter of rice and rubber grown in delta of Mekong River and exported through the ship of port of Saigon, which was made the colonial capital. Cambodia and Laos remained little developed commercially, and now northern Vietnam, the area around Hanoi, was already too densely populated on the Chinese model to have surplus for export. But there was some small industrial growth there, and in northern part of Haiphong, the colonial administration tried to improve French culture on territories collectively called Indochina. Control, control was centralized in French hands and traditionally institutions were weakened. Tropical Java was richly productive of plantation crops promoted by Dutch, sugar, coffee, tea, tobacco, and variety of others. So the next is the independent Siam. While the rest of Southeast Asia was being taken over imperialist power, the Thais kept their independence. Their country lay between the British in Burma and Malaya and the French in Indochina. Thai foreign trade and investment was balanced by French annexation of Thai territory and claims in western Cambodia and Laos. British Malaya detached Siam's southern province. The Thais benefited from series of shrewd and able kings who adroitly played the French off against the British and argued the advantage to both of leaving at least part of their country as buffer states. King Mongkut, 1851 to 1868, encouraged the study of Western science and put into practice European technique of rule, including the survey of Siam's border. He and his successor had to grant special trade, residence, and legal privilege to the colonialist power, a system like imposed on China, but there was no foreign effort to take over the government. Thai economy was developed along the same line as colonial Southeast Asia, with a big new export trade in rice from the Delta area and Valley of the Chao Phraya, followed later by rubber, tin, and tropical hardwoods. Bangkok, the capital, grew rapidly as virtually the sole port of foreign trade and spreading commercialization. So the last is the overseas Chinese. Immigrant Chinese began to flood into all commercially developed parts of Southeast Asia in growing numbers after 1870. As plantation and mining labor and as traders, they soon largely monopolized the retail trade in all cities of Southeast Asia, although they shared it with immigrant Indians in Burma and Malaya. In Bangkok, they become over the half of population and as in Vietnam controlled most large export trade in rice. They were understandably resented by many Southeast Asian, especially since they also served as the money lenders and owned most of the shops, but they were often welcomed, the colonialists, as useful labor and commercial agents. That's all. Thank you.